Adolf Hitler is one of the most controversial figures in history. We've all, to some extent, been acquainted with the public life of this individual in his political and military roles. The career of the man responsible for the bloodiest war of the 20th century has been tirelessly analyzed by scholars and historians worldwide over the years. However, very little is known about the personal life of this dictator. In this new installment, we will follow the trail of the Führer's legacy to uncover the secrets of his key family connections. In today's episode, we will attempt to answer a haunting question: what became of the most hated surname in history? Without further ado, we invite you to unveil the family tree of the man who turned anti-Semitism into genocide. Welcome once again to Military History. The child you just saw is none other than Adolf Hitler. It probably seems strange to see such an innocent face, knowing that he was one of the cruelest men in history. However, his life began like many others. The future German Führer was born on April 20th, 1889, in a small village near Linz, not far from the German border, in what was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His family, of middle-class status, had a comfortable living thanks to his father's employment with the Imperial Customs Service. He was a man of dominant personality who had two faces, one amiable in public life and another violent and authoritarian behind closed doors at home. Father of the Nazi leader was not named Hitler, but Alois Schicklgruber. At the age of 39, he requested permission to use the name of his stepfather, Johann Georg Hitler. It was Alois himself who altered the surname by not writing it in that way, but as Hitler. No one knows why that spelling change occurred, but that's how it remained in history. Alois had several love affairs that led to his divorce from his first wife. One of his mistresses was Clara Pilzel, Hitler's mother. Although it cannot be confirmed to this day, there are versions circulating that Clara and Alois were second cousins. While his father had other children from his two previous marriages, after marrying Clara in 1885, they had 6 children. Among them, only 2 formed a stronger bond, Adolf and Paula, born in June 1896, but we will talk more about her later. Alois did not get along well with his only son, who insisted on pursuing art, while his father wished for him to become a civil servant. When Alois died in 1903, Hitler was able to start his artistic career, which clearly was not successful and pushed him towards other paths. Conversely, the relationship between Adolf and his mother was close, until a breast cancer took her to the grave in 1907, leaving her son completely devastated. Only he and Paula remained.
When we children played Red Indians, my brother Adolf was always the leader. All the others did what he told them. They must have had an instinct that his will was stronger than theirs.
One of the few direct testimonies of Adolf Hitler's childhood comes from Paula, who recounted that among all the siblings, it was he who provoked Alois's anger the most. She said, "It was Adolf, with his obstinacy, who pushed my father to extreme severity, and for that he received a good beating every day." After their father's death in 1903, Adolf, 7 years older than Paula, left for Vienna. Paula stayed with their mother. The sibling relationship worsened in 1908 when she tried to persuade him not to enlist in the army. They stopped speaking and only saw each other again 13 years later in Vienna. By then, Hitler was the leader of the National Socialist Party. In 1930, Hitler suggested to Paula that for her safety, it was better to change her last name to continue working. At that time, she was employed at an insurance company. The relationship with Paula was distant, but pleasant until 1941, when, during one of their meetings in Vienna, she told her brother that she was engaged to an officer named Erwin Jekelius. However, the wedding never took place. Hitler not only forbade it, but also ordered Jekelius's arrest and sent him to the Eastern Front, where he died as a prisoner of war in a Soviet camp. Paula never forgave him. After the war, the Nazi leader's sister was captured, interrogated, and her assets were confiscated by the US government, despite not having participated in Hitler's activities. During this interrogation, Paula defended him and stated that she did not believe Adolf had been involved in the extermination of millions of people. Later, history would prove her wrong. Paula was released and returned to Vienna, where she survived with the help of some friends until she found a job in an art gallery. In 1952, she moved to Germany, disappearing amidst its ruins. Hitler's only sister died there 8 years later. Now let's turn to the case of Otto, the brother virtually unknown to official history. When the dictator was only 3 years old, his mother gave birth to a child with hydrocephalus, who died after 6 days. According to the historians responsible for this discovery, this experience has not been taken into account in the analyses and descriptions of his personality conducted so far. Thus, researchers point out that the dictator's biography has been written based on false assumptions. Until now, the biography placed Hitler as the fourth of 6 siblings. However, the new documents prove that Adolf was the third offspring of the family before Otto came into the world and died 6 days later. Experts even refer to the possible influence, albeit subconscious, of that traumatic experience on the Nazi doctrine that disabled individuals should be eliminated in order to improve and purify the race. Something that in his adulthood, Hitler would take to unimaginable limits. Now let's delve into the story of the Führer's nephew-in-law, William Patrick Hitler. The story of William Patrick Hitler is truly worth telling. It couldn't have been easy for this man to bear such a surname. Indeed, it wasn't. Despite his attempts in his youth to ingratiate himself with his uncle, he managed to change the course of his own story. He rebelled against the supposed mandates and showed convictions far removed from those of his famous relative. William Patrick Hitler was born on March 12, 1911 in the city of Liverpool, United Kingdom, into a household formed by Alois Hitler Jr., son of his father's previous marriage, and his wife, Bridget Dowling. The head of the family had the uncomfortable privilege of being the half-brother of the Nazi leader. This was not only a heavy burden for him, but also for the rest of the family and their descendants. With the outbreak of World War I, Alois Hitler Jr. ended up abandoning his family, and young William was left in the care of his mother. Alois remarried, but only re-established contact in the mid-1920s when he wrote to Bridget asking her to send William to visit him in Germany. This happened during the days of the so-called Weimar Republic. William arrived in 1929 at the age of 18 for a short stay and then returned with his mother to the United Kingdom. However, for some reason, in 1933 he returned to Nazi Germany, possibly with the aim of taking advantage of his uncle's rise to power. Adolf Hitler seemed to meet the young man's expectations and got him jobs, first in a bank, then at the Opel factory, and later as a car salesman. Unsatisfied with the outcome, William demanded something better from his uncle. There are many versions insisting that he even blackmailed the Nazi leader with selling embarrassing family stories to the press. In 1938, under the apparent promise of a high-ranking job in one of the official departments of the Nazi state, Hitler asked the young man to renounce his British citizenship. William thought it was a trap and fled the country, never to return. The following year, he and his mother embarked on a joint lecture tour of the United States, during which the young man spoke of his hatred towards his uncle. However, fate had an unexpected turn in store for them. On September 1st of that year, World War II broke out and they had to stay and live there.
I have just left Germany, and Adolf Hitler, who is my uncle, I personally have no time for. I believe that Hitler's policy in Europe will not bring any benefit to the human race at all. I hope that the American people in this country will not be kidded by my moustache, because after all, my heart is in the right place, and that's the main thing.
William Hitler's life changed drastically in 1944 when, tired of the burden of bearing the infamous surname, he decided it was time to fight against his very own uncle. It was then that he directly contacted the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and formally asked him to allow him to enlist in the American Armed Forces. The idea was one and only one: to rid himself of the stain of the Hitler name in favor of the cause for freedom and from the Allied side. Finally, he was granted the necessary permissions to join the U.S. Navy. When the war ended, William Patrick Hitler married and changed his heavy paternal name to Stuart Houston. This controversial figure, who died in 1987, had 4 children. One of them is Alexander Stuart Houston. In Patchogue, Long Island in the city of New York, an American flag waves in a garden. The owner of the house is Alexander Stuart Houston, the great-nephew of Adolf Hitler. The man lives almost anonymously, under a pseudonym that does not evoke the sinister past of his great-uncle. In appearance, nothing connects him to Adolf Hitler. He, like his father and siblings, also does not want it to be so. Alexander, who is around 75 years old, is the eldest of the descendants of the Nazi genocidaire. When he was born, his parents chose Adolf as his middle name. Today, it does not appear on his documents. Just like his father, Alexander, moved by the evidence of the bloody official history, shuns the surname that once destroyed the lives of millions of innocents. It's time to talk about the women in the Führer's life, a very peculiar chapter in the life of this sinister figure. They called her Geli, short for Angela. She was Hitler's niece and, according to the Nazi leader's biography, his great love, a taboo love. Today, few doubt that it was the only truly profound story of his life. On September 19, 1931, Geli was found dead in her bedroom in Hitler's apartment in Munich, Germany. She was discovered in a pool of her own blood, with a bullet wound to her chest. Her uncle's pistol lay beside her. No investigation was ever conducted, not even an autopsy. Instead of putting an end to the rumors, this only fueled them, creating an enigma that remains unresolved to this day. After his niece's death, Hitler fell into a deep depression. Heinrich Hoffmann, a photographer and close friend of the Führer, claimed that if Geli had not died, things might have been different. He believed that after her death, the seeds of inhumanity began to sprout within the Nazi leader. But who was this woman really? Geli entered Hitler's life when she was 17 and he was 36. The Nazi leader summoned her mother to work as a housekeeper in his home in Munich. Soon, the leader of the National Socialist Party fell head over heels for his niece, whom he described as an unusual beauty. But that wasn't all. Geli, besides being an attractive teenager, was as intelligent as her uncle. When Hitler moved to his luxurious apartment in the city, Geli stayed with him. By then, the girl was 21 years old and had gone from being the daughter of a domestic worker to the queen of the court. Those who shared life with the dictator claim that few women were admitted into his inner circle. Certainly, they were never allowed to become the center of attention and had to remain in sight, but not heard. They could occasionally take a small part in the conversation, although they were never allowed to defend a point of view or contradict Hitler. With his niece, everything was different. However, as he became more passionate about her, Geli became increasingly indifferent. In the last months of her life, she made desperate efforts to escape. Geli wanted to go to Vienna, some say forever. The only thing that is certain is that at some point between the sunset of September 18th and the morning of September 19, 1931, 23-year-old Geli left this world. Her death became one of the pieces of the perpetually incomplete puzzle. After this event, Hitler assured his associates that he was now a completely free man, belonging only to the German people and his mission. What no one knew was that shortly after his niece's death, Hitler had intensified a relationship with someone who would play the most important role in his life. We are talking about our last protagonist, Eva Braun, the woman who lived in the shadow of Hitler.
Diría, según lo que sé hoy, que ella era una persona evidentemente depresiva. Tenía que disimular su depresión todo el tiempo. Con deportes, con ropa, de alguna manera tenía que distraerse constantemente de lo que la agobiaba.
You have just heard Gertrude Weisker, Eva Braun's cousin, who spent the last months of 1944 with her when the Reich was collapsing. After listening to it, you may be wondering what happened in Eva's life for her to suffer this depression. To answer it, it is necessary to know it a little more. Behind every great man there is a great woman, but what woman is behind the being that personifies the devil himself? Adolf and Eva met in October 1929. The Nazi leader invited her to the opera and thus began their relationship. Although before beginning her affair, the future genocidaire investigated Eva's family tree to find out if she had any Jewish ancestors. The relationship between the two was not easy at all. Proof of this are Eva's two attempts. The first was in 1932, during Hitler's grueling election tour. In order to get the attention of her lover, she shot herself in the chest with her father's pistol. The second took place in 1935, when Hitler had already gained absolute power in Germany. The reasons were the same. Eva Braun felt alone and abandoned.
El intento de Eva Braun muestra que esta relación, en ese momento, ya había adquirido una dimensión más profunda. Que de ninguna manera era una relación superficial, sino que esta relación de alguna manera había perdido el control.
Although Hitler began to pay more attention to him, his role remained little recognized. Only a very small circle of trust knew about their relationship. Eva Braun lived in the shadow of the Führer. However, according to the writer and historian Heike Gertemaker, the dictator's lover clearly shared his worldview and political ideas. The outbreak of war considerably altered Eva Braun's life at the Berghof residence, which, in 1941, became the headquarters where all operations at the front were discussed. The constant visits of military personnel to the mansion increased, and the time for private life almost completely disappeared. As the days went by, Eva Braun couldn't stand being away from her love. She reflected it in her personal diary. "The weather is delicious, and I, the lover of the greatest man in Germany and the world, but I have to sit at home, looking out the window." The war was going from bad to worse for Germany. The Führer's health was also worsening, and Eva Braun wrote a will understanding that the end could be near for her. On January 16, 1945, Hitler moved to his Berlin bunker, and Eva followed him. With the Russian army at the gates of the capital, the girl was practicing with her pistol in case she had to shoot herself the moment they reached the bunker. After giving up the war, Hitler ordered everyone, including Eva Braun, to leave for safety, but she did not want to leave the Führer. On April 29, 1945, they were married in the Berlin bunker. In the presence of the commanders and leaders who remained there, a simple ceremony was held where Hitler gave his fiancée a ring hastily forged for the occasion. The next day, April 0th, the newlyweds entered the Führer's office. There, Eva received a dose of cyanide and a gun. Hitler chewed the vial and shot himself in the head. Eva, although she did not manage to fire the gun, died of poisoning at age 33. Thus concluded the tragic story of these two lovers who knew how to invent a strange way of loving each other, an indecipherable passion between love and death. The endless labyrinth that history presents to us sometimes leads us to face little-known situations. Such is the case of the secrets of Hitler's family. The fact of clinging to the official story sometimes prevents us from looking at circumstances that are extremely curious and interesting. That is why questions and doubts are always valid, since it is those answers that will lead us to the discovery of what usually remains hidden. That is also our responsibility to history. In this way, we come to the end of our delivery today. If you like this content, we invite you to subscribe and activate notifications. Without further ado, we say goodbye until the next installment of Military History. Thank you very much for joining us.